The rain had been relentless, cascading in icy bladed sheets that sliced through the hollow streets of Briar Hollow like glass. At the front desk of the small-town police station, Officer Dana Hart was locking up for the night when she noticed movement outside. A shadow hunched and swaying unnaturally under the sputtering glow of the street lamp. Lightning cracked across the sky and Dana froze. It was a German shepherd. Drenched, bleeding, barely upright. Its chest rose and fell in ragged bursts as it dragged itself across the road, gripping something in its jaws, a backpack. Dana darted to the station doors and yanked one open. The shepherd collapsed at her feet with a wet thud, the muddy backpack dropping beside it. Then came the sound. Soft, fragile, almost lost in the storm. A baby's cry. The world shifted. The sterile silence of the Briar Hollow Police Department shattered. Officers flooded the front room, weapons drawn, uncertain what this was. But Dana already knew, this wasn't just an injured dog. This shepherd had brought them something. Something unimaginable. They named him Shadow because the tag on his collar was rusted and unreadable. But his name didn't matter. What mattered was what lay inside that backpack. A baby. No more than 3 months old. Her tiny body was ice cold, her skin ghostly pale, but her chest still rose and fell in faint, desperate rhythm. She was wrapped in a damp towel. Clutched in her curled fists was the last of her strength. Officer Mila Grant dropped to her knees and gasped, tears already pooling in her eyes. Oh my God. She's alive. She's alive. Lieutenant Reuben Chase took control. Get medics. Blankets. Oxygen. Move. The room erupted into motion. Through it all, Shadow didn't move. He simply lay there, head down, ribs shuddering, eyes locked on the baby. Protecting her. Even now. No one realized it yet, but this German shepherd had just saved a life, and opened the door to a mystery Briar Hollow was nowhere near ready to solve. The storm outside raged on as if nature itself refused to go unnoticed. The kind of storm that rattled windows and soaked through bones. The kind that made even the bravest townsfolk hesitate before stepping outside. It was the sort of night meant for staying in, sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting for the chaos to pass. But chaos had already walked in, dripping blood and rainwater onto the department floor. Dana knelt beside the shepherd. She pressed a hand to his side, wincing at the warmth of blood seeping through soaked fur. The dog didn't flinch. He didn't growl or pull away. His eyes never left the baby. Something in Dana's chest tightened. Years on the force had taught her to recognize certain looks, guilt, panic, rage. But what she saw in Shadow's gaze wasn't any of those. It was devotion. Pure and unshakable. And pain. She'd seen that look once before years ago, on the face of a father whose daughter had gone missing in the woods. When they found her safe, wrapped in an emergency blanket, the father had collapsed to his knees and stared at her like she was the last star left in a blackened sky. Shadow was looking at the baby like that. The medic team burst in, led by a young paramedic named Troy, who'd only been on the job 6 months. His hands trembled as he unzipped the bag fully, his breath catching at the sight of the infant inside. She's freezing, he muttered, motioning to the others. We need to get her to the ER, stat. They wrapped the baby in heated foil blankets, her faint cries fluttering like moth wings against the roar of the wind outside. Her skin was so pale it looked almost translucent under the station lights. Dana stood frozen for a beat, heart pounding against her ribs like fists on a locked door. She couldn't stop staring at the dog. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a memory stirred. Her grandfather had raised German shepherds, used to say they were smarter than most people and a whole lot braver. He used to tell her stories at bedtime, of shepherds who pulled wounded soldiers from enemy fire in Europe, who tracked missing children through forest land no human would dare enter. Dogs that had run through fire and flood because their heart told them to. God writes courage into their bones, he'd whisper. Tonight she believed it. Shadow's breathing was shallow now. Every inhale a shiver. Every exhale a statement. I made it. I did what you couldn't. One of the other officers, Raymyers, knelt beside Dana. I've seen K9s take bullets before, he murmured, but I've never seen one carry a baby through a damn hurricane. Dana didn't answer. Because it wasn't just the act that shook her, it was the timing. There had been no call, no tip-off, no lost child report. If Shadow hadn't come, no one would have known. Not until it was too late. Not until the rain stopped and the silence screamed. They moved the baby into the ambulance, sirens wailing into the storm, tail lights disappearing down Main Street. For a moment, everyone watched it go. Then attention turned back to the shepherd. Shadow's body trembled. A pool of blood spread from beneath him, the muddy runoff mixing with crimson on the tile. "I need a vet," Dana snapped. "Now." Calls went out, but Briar Hollow didn't have a 24-hour vet clinic. The nearest emergency animal hospital was 2 towns over. Roads were half flooded. The response? Unreachable for now. Dana looked down at him, whispering, "Hold on, okay? You're not done yet." Shadow blinked slowly as if acknowledging her words. Or perhaps he already knew. Perhaps he had always known. Outside, the rain softened to a mist. Wind whispering down empty streets like breath through cupped hands. The town was still asleep, unaware that its heartbeat had just changed. A baby had been saved. A dog lay bleeding. And a door to the past, long locked and ignored, had just been blown wide open. Earlier that week, Shadow had been reported missing. He wasn't just any dog, he was a retired K-9 from the Eastwood precinct, once assigned to Officer Marcus Vale, a former Marine who'd left the force after sustaining a spinal injury. In his prime, Shadow had been more than just a partner. He'd been a force of instinct and discipline, a canine trained for urban detection, search and rescue, and more impressively, trauma response. Stories of his service rippled quietly through the precinct. Tracking a missing toddler through a thunderstorm in under 30 minutes, disarming a suspect simply by presence, standing guard beside a fallen officer until help arrived. There were photos, grainy, yellowing, pinned to the precinct's old corkboard, of Shadow in his tactical vest, nose upturned, eyes burning with intent. Since his retirement, Vale had lived alone in a cabin deep in the pinewoods north of Briar Hollow. A reclusive figure. No family. No visitors. Just Shadow. Locals often spotted them at dawn, walking the trails in silence, man and dog moving as if still on patrol. Shadow never strayed far, always scanning the treeline like he was waiting for something to go wrong. There was something hauntingly beautiful in the way they moved, like soldiers who hadn't been told the war was over. Maybe in some quiet way it never was. Vale carried the scars of combat, both foreign and domestic, and Shadow, with his graying muzzle and limping gait, bore the same. In small towns like Briar Hollow, people don't always ask questions, but they notice. The postmaster once said, "Those two don't talk much, but they sure listen hard." 3 days ago, Vale had called in to report that Shadow had escaped through a broken section of the fence. "He's getting old," someone at dispatch joked. "Probably chased a raccoon and got lost. He'll find his way back." The words had come with a casual shrug, the kind people offer when something feels explainable. Dogs wander, they told themselves. Fences break. The world keeps turning. But Shadow hadn't returned. Not until that stormy night, and not without a message. The baby, rushed to Fair Lake Memorial, was stabilized by ER nurses who wrapped her in heated blankets and inserted 4 lines with trembling urgency. Diagnosed with mild hypothermia and signs of prolonged malnourishment, doctors later said if she'd been found an hour later, she likely wouldn't have survived. But she had been found. And that posed the question no one could answer. Where had Shadow found her? And more terrifying, who had left her out there to die? Even in a world filled with Amber Alerts, surveillance footage, and social media tracing, the most vulnerable can still vanish without a whisper. How many babies disappear into the cracks of the system? How many cries are muffled by circumstance, overlooked until it's too late? Back at the station, as rain gave way to dawn's gray hush, Shadow lay on a blanket in the corner of the bullpen. His front paw was fractured. Several ribs cracked. A jagged wound along his flank required 12 stitches. Every injury whispered the same truth. This wasn't luck. This had been a mission. And somehow he had completed it. What kind of animal pushes through pain like that? What tells a creature, bone-weary, half-blind with blood loss, to keep moving forward with the weight of a newborn in its jaws. Perhaps it wasn't instinct alone. Perhaps it was memory. Dana Hart couldn't sleep that night. She kept seeing the image in her mind, the soaked backpack, the way the towel had been wrapped carefully, the small pacifier tucked into the pocket like a quiet prayer. Someone hadn't wanted the baby to die, but they'd still left her to. And Shadow? How had he even known she was there? Questions swirled like smoke around Dana's mind. Did Shadow see it happen? Did he hear the cries in the woods and recognize a distress call no human could decipher? Had he followed a scent, like he'd done 100 times before, and known, without hesitation, that it was time to act even if no one had ordered him to? By sunrise, child services had arrived. With no identification, no reports of a missing child, and no witnesses, they named the baby Sage. The infant had no past, but she had a protector. Shadow, even groggy from medication, stirred every time someone new walked into the room. He tried to stand, whining softly, eyes scanning faces, as if looking for someone. Some officers thought he was disoriented. Others believed he was waiting for Vale. But Dana, watching from the doorway, had another thought. What if he wasn't looking for someone he knew? What if he was looking for someone she knew? 3 days later, Officer Mila Grant followed a hunch. Digging through station logs, she cross-referenced missing persons reports from the past year. One name blinked back at her like a warning. Lucia Alvarez, age 16. Missing for 4 months. The case had gone cold quickly. Lucia had been living with an estranged uncle after being removed from her mother's custody. No phone. No active social circle. Her school counselor had noted signs of withdrawal, and possibly pregnancy. It had been speculation at the time. There had been no proof. So the file had gathered dust. But now, it felt different. Baby Sage had olive-toned skin, tight black curls, and was estimated to be about 3 months old. It wasn't a leap to consider she could be Lucia's child. The timing aligned. The features matched. And then there was the silence, the devastating, echoing silence that often surrounds girls like Lucia. Girls who fall between the cracks, who aren't missed loudly enough, whose stories are easily shelved in overstuffed file cabinets because their lives don't scream for attention the way others do. And then Mila saw something that changed everything. Lucia's last known contact? Officer Marcus Vale. Volunteering at a downtown food bank. Staff logs showed Lucia had visited 3 times in 2 weeks. On each visit, she had spoken privately with him. Witnesses described Vale as protective, concerned. That was enough for Dana Hart to head north. To the cabin. To the quiet man in the woods. To the dog who had tried to say something no one had understood. The road to Marcus Vale's cabin was familiar to Dana Hart. She'd driven it during search and rescue drills, missing person checks, even a few routine wellness calls for off-grid residents. But this time felt different. The trees loomed heavier. The sky hung low. The air smelled of pine and secrets. There's something about pine woods after a rain, how the needles drink the storm and exhale ghosts. The road was pockmarked with puddles, slicked in the residue of a night that hadn't yet let go. Dana rolled down her window a crack, letting in the scent, earthy, wet, and strangely hollow, like time itself was holding its breath. Half a mile before her destination, her GPS blinked out. Not unusual. Vale didn't live with the modern world. He had no neighbors, no cell signal, and no interest in being found. And wasn't that always the way with some people? You don't notice the hermits until something burns down, or someone dies. We build systems to find the missing, track the vulnerable, but there are always edges. Vale had lived in those edges, alone with his pain and his dog, a ghost in his own story. Dana parked where the gravel path ended and continued on foot, boots sinking into damp earth. The rain had stopped, but the forest was still bleeding with it. Mud, mist, silence. The cabin came into view, crouched between the trees like it was hiding. There was a weight to the place. The kind of house that held more stories than it told. Moss clung to the roof like a hand that didn't want to let go. A rocking chair on the porch sagged under years of use, or absence. The wood groaned faintly in the breeze, and for a split second, Dana imagined a younger Vale sitting there, dog at his feet, watching the trees as if they might open and reveal something terrible or divine. The porch light was on, flickering. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Someone was home or had been recently. Dana placed her hand on her holstered sidearm and stepped forward. She knocked. Nothing. Mr. Vale. Officer Hart, Briar Hollow PD. I need to speak with you. Pause. Then the door creaked open an inch. Marcus Vale's weathered face appeared in the narrow gap, gray-bearded, hollow-eyed, draped in a threadbare hoodie. You found her, he said. His voice was a whisper. Dana blinked. We did. Shadow brought her in. She's alive. For a long moment, Vale didn't move. Then he opened the door all the way and stepped aside. Come in. The cabin smelled of smoke, coffee, and something faintly metallic. Blood. Rust? Dana couldn't tell. The interior was Spartan but obsessively neat. Books lined the walls, military medals arranged with surgical precision. A folded American flag rested on the mantelpiece. She took it in piece by piece. The bookshelf, the war memorabilia, the frayed rug over concrete. She'd seen other cabins like this in her years of service. Isolation does something strange to a person. It amplifies silence. It sharpens memory until every sound echoes with old pain. It was the kind of place where grief didn't just live, it curated itself. Vale remained standing, arms crossed tightly across his chest. You're not here for coffee, he said. No, Dana replied, easing into a wooden chair. I need you to tell me about Lucia Alvarez. Vale's shoulders flinched. His gaze drifted to the window. I didn't hurt her, he murmured. I tried to help. So she was here. He nodded slowly. She came to me, said she had no one, said she was pregnant, said her uncle was dangerous. Dana felt the heat rise in her chest. She kept her voice measured. And instead of calling us, you let her stay? She begged me not to. Said she'd run. Said she trusted me, because Shadow was good to her. Again that name. The one who had always seen what others didn't. She stayed here. I gave her the spare room. I taught her how to breathe through contractions, how to prep formula. I brought her food. Dana cut in gently. Where is she now, Marcus? Silence. Then his eyes dropped to the floor. She didn't make it. Dana's stomach turned. She died. During labor? He nodded. It was fast. I tried CPR. I swear I tried. But she lost too much blood. She was gone before I could even carry her to the truck. And instead of calling for help, I panicked. I buried her. He didn't look up. His hands trembled. She asked me to protect her daughter. She said her name would be Sage. She made me promise to find someone safe. But I couldn't do it. So he did. Shadow, Dana said quietly. Vale nodded, eyes watering now. He wouldn't leave the crawl space. Whined all night. I finally opened it, and he pulled the bag out himself. Like he remembered. Like he was trying to finish what I couldn't. Dana said nothing. What could she say? There are moments when protocol and training dissolve into silence. When you're not an officer, not a badge or a title, just a human being staring into the aftermath of another's regret. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to ask why he hadn't tried harder. Why he'd let fear tie his hands. But part of her already knew the answer. That afternoon, Dana stood behind the cabin, staring at a crude mound of leaves and stones. A weather-worn wooden cross leaned into the soil. No name. No date. Forensics exhumed the body. The medical examiner confirmed it, a teenage female, recently postpartum. DNA results, expedited with emergency authorization, confirmed the truth Dana already knew in her bones. Lucia Alvarez had been Sage's mother. There was something brutal about the finality of confirmation. The moment truth steps out of the shadows, it doesn't bring peace, it brings gravity. The kind that settles in your bones and makes your uniform feel too tight. The story spread fast, faster than anyone could prepare for. From the local Briar Hollow Tribune to national news, headlines exploded. Retired K-9 saves infant from death in the woods. German Shepherd hero uncovers teen's tragic secret. Dog breaks silence no one wanted to hear. But inside the station the celebration was muted. Because what Shadow had dragged into the station wasn't just a baby. It was a buried truth. A truth no one had wanted to see. A truth that had been walked past. Ignored. Filed. Forgotten. How many other girls like Lucia had been quietly folded into the background of someone else's life? How many more might never have a shadow to find them? Some wounds don't bleed. They vanish. They go silent. They sit at empty school desks, they show up in vague welfare reports, they disappear into thin air, and the world keeps turning. Until a dog limps out of the woods in a storm and lays the truth down on your doorstep. While the world called him a hero, Shadow didn't care for fanfare. He slept most days on a padded blanket at Officer Mila Grant's home, where he was recovering. His ribs still ached, his movements slow, but his eyes remained sharp. Always watching, always waiting. There was a quiet dignity in the way he bore pain, the way he shifted his weight gingerly but never complained. Some dogs whine when they hurt. Others yelp. But Shadow had the stoicism of a war veteran, one who'd seen enough to know when to bark and when to simply endure. His silence was a language of its own, one shaped by duty, loss, and a love that no injury could dim. At the hospital, the baby, now officially named Isla Sage Alvarez, was thriving. Nurses rotated holding her. She responded best to Diane Lockhart, the neonatal nurse who had first fed her. "She clutches my shirt like she remembers," Diane said, rocking the child gently. "Like she's afraid I'll vanish." There's something uncanny about the way infants remember what they cannot describe. Trauma, even early, doesn't always leave visible scars, but it settles in the nervous system. Some researchers call it body memory. It's why babies who've survived hardship often flinch at sudden sounds, or refuse to sleep unless they're touching something familiar. Safety for them isn't a concept, it's a feeling. And for Isla, that feeling had a shape, a scent, a heartbeat, Shadow. Within a week, Diane requested temporary foster placement. "She's been through war," she told Child Services. "I don't know what she remembers, but her body remembers. I can feel it." Child Services agreed pending background checks. Diane took Isla home and on her first night there, placed a blanket next to her crib, for Shadow. Though his injuries had not fully healed, Shadow limped toward it the moment he saw her. He curled into a tight ball beside her crib. That night, Isla slept through till morning. It became a pattern. She'd whimper until Shadow appeared. Then she'd calm. Her hands sometimes reached between the crib bars, grasping for fur. "She doesn't just recognize him," Diane said to Dana one day. "She trusts him. Down in her bones." It's not uncommon for trauma survivors, human or animal, to find each other. Shadow, broken in body but not in spirit, had lost his purpose when his service ended. But now he had one again. Watching Isla. Guarding her. Making sure she never had to cry without someone coming. But the quiet wouldn't last. A week after the burial, a local hunter named Greg Vaughn walked into the station, carrying a heavy tarp folded under one arm. Found this near the North Ridge, not far from Vale's property. Thought it was trash at first, but he trailed off, placing it on Dana's desk. Inside were blood-stained medical gloves, an old prepaid cell phone, a ripped flannel shirt, and baby wipes with traces of dried blood. Old but real. Dana's gut twisted. It wasn't just the contents, it was the context. The kind of items that spoke louder than words. A burner phone, makeshift cleaning supplies, an attempt at control that had clearly gone wrong. She could already hear the forensic analyst's voice. "None of this is accidental." She called Mila. "Bring Shadow." They returned to Vale's woods with a search team and let Shadow off leash. He sniffed the items, then stood very still. And then, slowly, he began to walk. Limping. Determined. The team followed in tense silence. The forest around them had taken on a different texture. Not just wet and cold, but haunted. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder how many secrets trees can keep if they're never asked the right questions. After about 30 feet, he stopped at a patch of moss under an old elm. He looked back once, then started pawing the ground. 3 hours later, they uncovered a small wooden box, sealed tight, wrapped in plastic. Inside, photographs, folded letters, and a journal bound in cracked leather. The journal belonged to Lucia. She'd written nearly every day since arriving at Vale's cabin. She had known she was pregnant before she left her uncle's care. She had run from more than just neglect. She'd fled a system that failed her. "I knew if I stayed," one entry read, "he would find a way to make me disappear." It was a chilling confirmation of what they had feared, and a crushing indictment of the institutions that were supposed to protect her. Lucia wasn't naive. She wasn't foolish. She was observant, scared, and in the end, heartbreakingly alone in a world that wasn't built to hear girls like her. Dana read the entries aloud that night at the station. Lucia wrote about the fear, the quiet whispers from other girls at the group home, the volunteer with kind eyes but a strange silence. She suspected she was being followed, watched. She confided in Vale. She wrote of how Shadow slept outside her door, barked when Vale entered unannounced, growled at shadows only he could sense. "I don't trust him," she wrote in one of the last entries. "But I trust the dog." Sometimes, survival doesn't come with loud instincts. It comes with quiet ones. A gut feeling. A turned shoulder. A dog's growl in the middle of the night. Lucia hadn't had proof, only patterns. But patterns are enough to scar a life or save one. The final pages stopped abruptly, 3 days before she gave birth. But that wasn't the worst of it. The letters in the box, dated earlier than Lucia's disappearance, were written by other girls. Girls no one had connected before. One envelope held a photo of an infant no one recognized. One note read, "If someone finds this, tell my mother I didn't run away. I was taken. He promised help. He lied." It was the kind of note no one writes lightly. The kind of confession born from desperation and resignation. Dana stared at it for a long time, wondering what the girl's name had been. Wondering if she was still alive. Wondering how many more there were, scattered like ashes across counties, stories half told and fully buried. The implications were horrifying. Vale hadn't just failed to report a death. He was potentially connected to something far worse. Something systemic. A spiderweb of silence spun between social services, overworked caseworkers, complicit administrators, and predators hiding behind the mask of volunteerism. How many times had this same story played out, just without the dog, the storm, the last-minute rescue? Dana reopened 6 missing persons cases across neighboring counties, each involving girls placed in the same troubled group home as Lucia. Each had listed volunteer mentor contact, Marcus Vale. Every file pointed to the same chilling possibility. Lucia hadn't been the only one. And if not for a German shepherd's stubborn loyalty and a newborn's stuttering cry, no one would have ever known. Briar Hollow was no longer quiet. What began with one German shepherd dragging a soaked backpack through a storm had unraveled a network of buried pain. Misfiled reports, missing girls, broken trust. The local media called it the Vale unveiling. But the officers closest to it, especially Dana, called it the reckoning. Because reckoning isn't just about justice. It's about finally facing what was ignored, intentionally or not. It's about looking back through the files you once skimmed, through the calls you thought were routine, and realizing you missed it. It's the echo of responsibility coming home. The journal had changed everything. A warrant was issued to search every inch of Vale's property. Most of it had already been combed, but one place hadn't. The basement. Vale had always claimed it was storage. Nothing worth noting. But Dana remembered what Shadow had done after he brought the baby in, how he kept scratching at the floorboards in the bullpen, how he'd paw at doors. Alert. Wait. Dogs don't forget. Their memory doesn't work the way ours does. They remember in scent, in vibration, in tone. A certain pressure in the air, a faint chemical trace in the wood. And sometimes they remember something we never even knew happened. They opened the trapdoor and descended. Shadow, now strong enough to walk without aid, followed them down. The moment his paws hit the concrete, he turned left and began whining at the wall. A small section of baseboard looked off, slightly warped. When Dana tapped it with her flashlight, it sounded hollow. Within minutes, the forensic team discovered a false wall. Behind it was a hidden room. A mattress, a bucket, a broken baby monitor, half-eaten food. And in one corner, scratches in the plaster, tally marks. Dozens of them. The room wasn't on any property blueprint. It had been added after construction. It was real. And it was recent. The air inside the compartment was thick, stale. The kind of air that forgets sunlight. One officer had to step out. Another just stared at the wall, whispering under his breath, "How long was she down here?" There was no calendar. No clock. Only scratches in a wall, each one a day someone thought they'd never survive. In a dusty wooden crate near the door, sealed in Ziploc bags, were more letters. More notes from girls who had come and never left the way they arrived. And one photo, an infant cradled by a girl with Lucia's eyes but not her. Dana's hand shook. She radioed the station. "We are now investigating this site as a confirmed scene of unlawful detainment. Notify Federal Task Force support." The headlines exploded. What had once been a heroic dog story became a full-scale multi-county child protection scandal. Advocacy groups mobilized. Protests formed outside the group homes still in operation. Senators tweeted support. The national spotlight burned hot. But through it all, Shadow remained calm. He didn't need cameras. He had never needed words. He had barked when no one would listen. He had dragged himself through pain, storm, blood, and night to deliver a truth that people had buried. He had acted when his human hadn't. And for that he was given a title. Not pet. Not retired K9. Hero. Diane Lockhart officially adopted Isla Sage Alvarez that spring. The process had been fast-tracked with overwhelming support from the community and from Shadow's presence. "She follows him like a second heartbeat," Diane told Dana one morning. "I swear, he wakes up seconds before she does." Shadow, now fully healed, still bore his scars, but they had become medals of a silent war. He was awarded the National Medal for Animal Heroism in Washington, D.C., but he slept through most of the ceremony. No tuxedos. No podiums. Just the quiet rhythm of breathing next to the child he refused to leave behind. His moment of pride came quietly, on Isla's first birthday. Just cupcakes, a few friends, a candle. Shadow sat beside her high chair like a sentinel, tail wagging, watching her clap and giggle. She never cried when he was near. One guest, a retired social worker, teared up and whispered, "That dog didn't just save her. He gave all of us a reason to do better." By the time Isla turned 5, the group home that had failed Lucia was gone, demolished to its foundation. The final wall came down under a gray sky, as if the town itself understood the weight of the moment. Dust rose in silence. And in its place stood a new structure. The Sage Center for Youth and Safety. A mural inside the lobby showed a little girl holding a dog's paw beneath stormy clouds. When asked what it meant, Isla, now in first grade, said, "That's the dog who saved me. But I think I saved him too." And maybe she had. Purpose isn't just something we give, it's something we receive. And for a dog with old eyes and a battered frame, Isla had been a light worth crawling through the dark for. By her 7th birthday, Shadow was slowing down. The stairs took longer. His eyes grew cloudy. But he never once missed bedtime. When Isla read aloud from picture books, he'd rest his head near her feet. Diane started to carry a small step stool with her to help him get onto the porch. "He won't stop trying," she said. "So I won't stop helping." The morning he passed was quiet. A spring breeze, a window open. Diane found him curled beside Isla's bed, head on his paws, peaceful. Isla didn't cry. She simply knelt, kissed his muzzle, and whispered, "Thank you." There was a maturity in her voice that made Diane's heart crack open. A kind of ancient grief passed down not through years, but through experience. At the town's memorial, beneath the bronze statue of a German shepherd holding a backpack, locals left flowers, drawings, even a leash. No fanfare. No speeches. Just quiet gratitude. One child placed a small toy beside the statue. A plush puppy. A note attached read, "I want to be brave like you." Isla grew up with the story of how she was found, but she never needed to tell it. She carried it in the way she listened. The way she knelt when others cried. The way she said, "You're safe. I'm here." At 16, she began volunteering at the Sage Center. By 22, she was a certified trauma counselor. Her office held just one framed photo, a baby gripping a dog's ear through a crib, and a plaque that read, Sometimes the loudest cry for help has no sound at all. She never forgot Lucia. Never forgot that a young girl had tried to survive, tried to love, and had given everything for one chance to save her daughter. And she never forgot the dog who finished what love began. One evening, long after the center had closed for the night, Isla sat in her office reading over intake notes for a new child arriving the next morning. A knock sounded softly at her door. It was the janitor, holding up a package. No return address. Inside, a photograph. Lucia, smiling faintly, arms around Shadow as a young pup. On the back in smudged ink. She found him before he found her. Maybe that's how it always works. If Shadow's story moved you like it moved us, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below. When was the last time you truly listened, not with your ears but with your heart? Was it a moment you almost missed, a silence that spoke louder than words, a gesture from someone, or some creature, that told you everything you needed to know? We'd love to hear it. Let's keep telling stories that matter. Let's amplify voices that don't always get heard. Let's remember that sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that stay with us the longest. Because sometimes heroes don't speak. They act. They show up, uninvited, unexpected, unwavering. And sometimes all it takes is one German shepherd. To cross the rain-soaked miles. To carry the truth in his teeth. And to change everything we thought we knew about loyalty, love, and what it really means to be brave.